As artists, we tend to create our art through many different types of inspirations. And in my experience, I usually create my art through a lot of intuition and spirit communication. So, this video is about to be a bit woo woo. So, if you're not into this type of stuff, then this might not be the video for you. But I think this video will be really great for spiritualists, even historians and researchers, because I have some questions and yeah, people who are just into writing. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into how I've been writing my latest book through spirit communication. Okay, so let me tell you what's been going on with my writing process. So, for those who don't know, I have written a darker version of a Cinderella story, and I have it up on Amazon, and I will also leave the link in the description box if anybody wants to check it out. So, I've written a darker version, and I am writing a part two to the story. And the way that I write, so I created my own genre, which is dark esoteric urban fiction or dark soul erotica, one of the two. And it's basically me um, writing from a different way of like philosophy, more like dark philosophy. It doesn't mean evil, but it does mean, a lot of the times I've learned a lot of things in life through going through certain situations. And I've gained a lot of wisdom through that. So I tend to write from a darker perspective. And also, I have sex scenes in my book and so on and so forth. And I make it's a blend of like philosophy and urban and fantasy fiction. So I'm in the middle of editing the part two. The first book, I had the story all down packed in my head. I knew it from start to finish. The second book, however, I knew how it was going to end, but I just didn't know how to go about the whole process. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just write and let it just come to me. And this book, oh my gosh, the writing process of this has been very intense because I've experienced certain scenarios that would pop in my head, and I'm like, where's this all coming from? And yeah, it's very trippy, but it's very just like out of the ordinary, if that's the best way I can describe it. So I'm gonna tell you guys how this all played out. So this is how I write my books. When I start off with the character creating, I usually tend to create characters that are of my ethnicity. So I'm very mixed. However, I grew up mainly in the Black community, so therefore when I write these characters, I usually go for ethnicities that I am, because it's a way for me to learn certain things of that culture. For instance, I'm part Indigenous American, but I didn't grow up in the Indigenous community, so therefore I like to put it in my writing because it gives me a chance to get close to the people, the group that I am from. I also have a bit of like Mediterranean and like Middle East and certain other um, groups that I'm a part of, but I never grew up in those communities, so therefore I like to put it in my books. So it's a way for me to get close to the group that I'm from. That's a really important piece to what I'm about to explain. So in this Cinderella book, without giving away too much, but it is important. So in this Cinderella book that I've been writing, the king, the prince, the whole family, they're of Moorish descent. Now, when I was writing this book, this was the only group where I was just like, I don't have a connection to this group, but I do feel the need to add this to the story. So, okay, I added. Everyone else is mainly of like the in between of like the Moors, the Europeans, and whatnot. So I didn't know that I was about to tap into something way deeper. So starting from this point, I have done my DNA test through certain sites like Ancestry, My Heritage, Genome Link. If I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know if I'm ever pronouncing that right, but Genome Link. And through those sites, I have seen that I have ancient DNA connections with people from Jordan and like um, Samaria, other parts of the Middle East, Egyptian. I believe that part is from my dad. The other ones, I'm just like, okay. So right in this story, I had made the origins of the Moorish coming from Jordan because that's a spot that we don't really hear about. It's like one of those spots where it's like a lesser known area in the Middle East. Like we all heard of like Afghanistan and Israel and all those other places, but you don't really hear about Jordan. So I thought that was pretty unique. So I added that into my story. And on top of that, I've been asking people that I know who are from Jordan, like what's it like growing up there and stuff like that, and just getting their perspective. And funny enough, one of the people that I was talking to, they figured that I had connections there in a way because of my name and like how I look. But I never told them that in my DNA it shows my DNA going back to like Jordan. Because it's like I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. It's just so far removed. So I added that to my story, and I lately throughout the whole writing process, I've been receiving downloads. Okay, I'm gonna say one thing. So this part, I don't. You know what? I'm gonna just explain it. I don't know how to explain it the best way I can, but this is what happened. So, in the second book, the king and the prince, they got beef, and I needed something, some type of controversy in this story. I just didn't know what. So literally a voice popped in my head, like a quiet voice in the background. It was just like, look up a sacrifice in the Bible. And I'm like, okay, I don't know any in particular except for one. Um, for those who don't know, I'm just a spiritual person. However, growing up, I did try my best to learn from different religions and go to the church and try to figure it all out. I even uh, used to do Bible studies with like the Jehovah Witnesses, and I was around just trying to everything out. But I never, even in the Bible studies that I was a part of and going to the church, I never heard of this sacrifice in the Bible. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look it up. And literally, I saw a sacrifice in the Bible between a king and a prince. And this goes back to the Moabs. And the Moabs and the Israelites were about to go to war. And the king needed a sacrifice to win. So he decided to sacrifice his son. And he like plastered him up on the wall for the Israelites to see. And when they saw that, they just backed down. And the Moabs won that particular war. And he sacrificed his son to a deity named Chemos, if I'm pronouncing that right. And yeah, I didn't know about this sacrifice in the Bible at all. And to make it even more deep, this place and time goes back to Jordan, where the war and the sacrifice all happened in Jordan. And I'm like, wait a minute, putting two to two together, how in my book the Moorish originates from Jordan. I'm trying to figure out some type of controversy. A voice in my head tells me to look up a sacrifice from the Bible. I find this sacrifice between a king and a son, and on top of that, it takes place in Jordan. It's like, how can I, like, you can't make this type of stuff up. There have been other downloads that I've been receiving throughout this writing process, and one of it kind of has to do with this part. So this has nothing to do with the book, but a few months ago I had created a alter ego name for myself, and that's something that a lot of artists do. And it's a name that happens to be in Hebrew, and only a few people know about my alter ego name. But it is in Hebrew, and funny enough, turns out I have some connections with that because my ancestors that go back to Barbados, they happen to be the Sephardic Jews that fled from Spain, Portugal, like long time ago, and settled in places like Brazil, Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados. And I never knew that up until recently, like about a couple of weeks ago. And it was so weird how everything is coming into place now, because I was trying to figure out what does this all mean, because I know it means something. And it's not like I always knew that I had ancestors that came from Barbados. But I never really looked too deep into that up until recently, where it wasn't even like I was looking into it. It's just one of my cousins had sent me something about the family from that side, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So I looked, out of curiosity, I looked a little bit into it, and then that's when I saw the whole Sephardic Jew connection. So I'm like, okay, this has to do with something. I just don't know. And turns out there is a Sephardic Jew connections with the Moors, because back in those days, everyone was like conforming with one another, because there was just a big old fight. I mean, there's still a big old fight with religion, but between being Muslim, Jewish, Christian, it was just such a battle. And funny enough, I actually have that in my book. I speak a little bit of that because the first king of the Moorish kingdom in my book, he was around during the Prophet Muhammad days, and he did not like the fact that he had to pretend to be Muslim just to get by, because if you didn't conform to that, you would get killed, or even I think you had to pay like a monthly fee to just walk around and not get killed. However, you couldn't practice certain things that you and your ancestors had originally practiced. Like, you couldn't do that. So it's either become a Muslim or get unalived or pay like a monthly fee. So the king in my book despised this idea. He wanted to practice what his ancestors had always practiced. And writing this, I'm just writing it all out. I had no idea that I even had like deep connections to that, because the Sephardic Jews, they worked hand in hand with the Moors in like Spain, and it was to a point where when Christianity really started taking over, a lot of them fled, which that's what my ancestors did. They up and moved to places like Trinidad and Barbados. So finding all of this out like around the same time as I'm editing this book, and I'm planning on releasing it in October, hopefully. But I'm just like, okay, why am I getting these particular downloads? And why do I feel the need that spirit or like my ancestors want me to put this into my book? Because it's not a historical book. It is fiction, but it has like a little bit of historical context in it. So I'm like, okay, I'm over here trying to figure it out. Um, I'm just over a week ago, I'm like in the shower trying to like put all of this together because now it's taking too much time trying to finish this book. So I'm like, okay, what is it? What am I supposed to do with this writing? Because now I feel like I'm not writing just for the sake of putting it out. I feel like there's like a bigger message to it. Um, a voice popped in my head, just like a quiet voice in the background, and it told me to check my palms. I'm like, check my palms. I'm looking down. I see like a bunch of X's and lines, and you don't really, who really studies their palms like that besides people who read palms? And I'm seeing all these like X's that I never really noticed. So I'm like, okay. So I started looking into that. I even picked up a book called The Art and Science of Palmistry, and turns out I have lines that show that I have spirit communications. And that usually shows up on the pinky because the pinky is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is all about communication. And on top of that, Mercury is in my 10th house of career, right along with my Mars. And in one of my videos, I spoke about having Mars and Mercury conjoined together. That's like automatic writing instant downloads because of the fiery energy of Mars and the communication of Mercury. So that's one of the ways that you have this ability. Um Another way is checking your palms apparently, because I have lines that show that spirits communicate with me, and other things like X's, and also I have like the mystique cross. It's I'm gonna save the palmistry for another video, but when I saw that, it kind of freaked me out because it's like it's leaving a mark on you, uh things that you didn't expect. It's like getting tatted of certain confirmations and contracts that you supposedly have completed. Yeah, it's a long story with that. So if you're somebody who feels like you have automatic writing and you're into astrology and palmistry, you should definitely check this out. Like I said, the one of the ways that is confirmation for me is my Mars and my Mercury conjuncted together in my 10th house of career. If you have that, or if you have Mercury in any of the water signs like Pisces, Scorpio, even in Gemini, because Gemini is the sign of communication. If you have Mercury in your 12th house, that's another indication that you have automatic writing. And if you check your pinky and you see certain lines, um, that's a confirmation right there. And this is the book that I picked up. It is like 540 something pages. I'm going to read this whole thing. I already started. I'm like on page, I don't know. I got it last week, so I'm like page 40 or something like that. Like I've really been diving deep into the stuff ever since a voice in my head was just like, check your palms. And I'm very spiritual, but I don't really dabble into, I don't go seeking certain things out. It's just if a message comes to me, then I like look it up, if that makes sense. But that's how I've been writing my book, and it's been very trippy. It's one of these things where I don't know where this path is taking me, but I know it's taking me somewhere, and that's the whole point of like intuition. You just follow it and you see where it leads to, if that makes sense. Spirit is telling me something. I don't know the whole thing yet, but I just have to wait and see until this all unfolds. And this is the beauty about intuition, because nowadays you have a lot of AI coming into play. And as artists, we should really appreciate these trippy parts about creating art using intuition, because this is something that AI doesn't have. It doesn't have spirit. something that we for sure have. So I definitely appreciate when I see artists creating from their higher self, if that makes sense. You always can hear it in the music, in the books, in the paintings. You know when an artist is really tapping into something higher than themselves versus AI. But yeah, that's all I have for this video. Um if anybody has any insights on like Sephardic Jews and Moors and the whole fighting that was going on back then, because I feel like that's one of the big things that's coming to me. I feel like what I'm receiving is like these spirits are being heard when they see someone that's writing from their perspective, because you don't really, it's not really talked about enough of the people back in the day that went through this, that had to conform, that was being unalive, that refused to be something that they're not. Like, they really went through it. So to have that being written in a book, even though it's fantasy fiction, but to have some of that being voiced out in literature, it's like, I don't know. I guess in a way they feel heard or seen. I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out.